Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They came for his home with smiles, fines, and polished lies. But when charm turned to threats, one man stood his ground. In a quiet suburb where memories run deep, a ruthless HOA Queen picked the wrong family to push. This isn't just a fight for property, it's war, and he's not backing down. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get sentimental over property lines and square footage, but this house, this land, it's in my blood. My parents built this place from the ground up long before I was born. A 3-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, nestled at the edge of a quiet suburb, surrounded by old trees and even older memories. When my mom passed and my dad followed a few years later, the house came to me. No mortgage, no strings. Just brick, wood, history, and a hell of a lot of work. My wife and I made a choice. Instead of chasing some shiny modern build in a new development, we poured every dollar we had, savings, bonuses, even our tax return, into this place. We expanded the garage, built a full workshop where I could work on my side carpentry projects, landscaped the yard, and installed a beautiful in-ground pool with a stone patio and a covered grill area, raised flower beds for her, a vegetable patch, a treehouse. It wasn't just home. It was our corner of paradise. We raised our kids here. Our 2 older ones are teens now, each with their own space, their own routine. And then there's our youngest, still small enough to call me a hero just for fixing her bike. Every part of this house has a piece of our life in it. Every screw, every fence post, every square foot of that yard. It's not just property. It's a living, breathing part of who we are. A couple years back, some corporate HOA tried to bulldoze their way into the area. Literally. They wanted to buy out the few remaining old homes like mine, raise the lots, and build some generic eco-park. They offered decent money, sure, but it was never about that. We said no. All of us. My neighbors and I banded together, and with the help of my brother, he's a damn good lawyer, we crushed their plans in court. Since then, peace had returned, at least for a while. It started with whispers. Whispers and stares from the guys around the neighborhood. Guys who used to talk about lawn fertilizer and their kids' baseball teams were suddenly all grinning like fools and talking about someone named Karen. I didn't pay it much attention at first. New people move in all the time, and every now and then someone stirs up a little attention. But this was different. This woman apparently had every single bachelor in the area acting like they were back in high school. Then I saw her for myself. She stepped out of a sleek silver Audi one afternoon while I was fixing a gate hinge. Long legs and black stockings, a tight pencil skirt, heels that didn't make a damn bit of sense for suburban pavement, and a blonde bob that bounced with every step like it had its own PR team. She walked like she owned the world and knew everyone wanted a piece of it. And judging by the reactions I saw from my neighbors, especially the single ones, she might not have been wrong. Turns out, Karen had just taken over as the head of the newly rebranded HOA that had been trying to muscle its way into our part of town. Before, it was a faceless group of developers in suits. Now it had a face, and what a face it was. Karen had charisma, confidence, and a voice like honeyed whiskey. She threw barbecues, organized events, got local vendors involved, and transformed her corner of the neighborhood into something straight out of a lifestyle magazine. HOA membership started soaring, and not because people wanted community newsletters. Even some of the guys who once stood beside me in that courtroom battle against the HOA started warming up to her. Not that I blame them. She wasn't just pretty, she was charming, disarming even, and she knew it. Me? I kept my distance. I had a wife, kids, a life. The last thing I needed was to get caught in some HOA soap opera, no matter how many legs it had. But Karen clearly didn't like being ignored. That became obvious the day she showed up at my door. She knocked like someone who already had the inside track, confident and casual. When I opened the door, I could tell she'd put effort into how she looked that day. Lip gloss, a blouse with just enough buttons undone to be noticed, but not enough to be inappropriate. She smiled like we were already old friends. "Hi," she said, tilting her head. "You must be the famous holdout." I didn't answer that right away. I just leaned against the doorframe, cautious. "And you must be the infamous Karen." She laughed. Light, musical, a little flirty. Guilty. "May I come in?" I didn't let her pass the threshold, but I stepped outside to be polite. She wasted no time pulling a glossy brochure from her handbag like she was pitching luxury condos in Malibu. She launched into her speech. Benefits of joining the HOA, the perks of living in the revitalized district, the low, allegedly membership dues, the new farmers market partnerships, community pool access, blah, blah, blah. But the punchline, she wanted me to exchange my 3-story home, the one I'd rebuilt with my own hands, for a brand new, eco-efficient 2-story model in their subdivision. She even showed me the specific house on the brochure, with my name printed neatly on the front in fake handwriting. "This one has your name on it. Literally," she said with a wink. I'll admit she was good. She knew how to sell a dream. She made it sound like I'd be doing my family a favor. New appliances, community perks, friendly neighbors, park views. But I'd heard that kind of pitch before, and I knew the fine print always bit hardest. Still, I didn't want to be rude. I took the brochure, smiled politely, and said I'd discuss it with my wife. Karen's expression flickered for a split second, just enough for me to catch the faintest trace of disappointment. But then she chuckled and tapped my arm with her perfectly manicured hand. "I'll be waiting for your answer," she said. "Don't take too long. The neighborhood's filling up fast." And with that, she turned and walked back down the path, hips swaying like a metronome, leaving a scent trail of expensive perfume and high-stakes ambition. I watched her leave, the brochure heavy in my hand, already knowing something wasn't right. The next morning, I tossed the brochure on the passenger seat and picked up my buddy Greg, who happened to be a licensed appraiser and had been in the real estate game for over a decade. If anyone could sniff out a scam beneath shiny marketing, it was him. We drove out to the address Karen had circled on the back of the pamphlet, supposedly the model home they wanted me to upgrade to. According to her, it was a 2-story modern build with high-efficiency appliances and community-centric features, whatever the hell that meant. It took us about 20 minutes to get there, and even before we turned onto the street, I felt a cold knot settle in my gut. The neighborhood looked off. 2 long rows of nearly identical beige houses stretched into the distance like someone had clicked copy and paste in a design software. Each house had the same lawn layout, same sad little tree planted in the same sad little patch of mulch. You couldn't tell where one ended and another began. We pulled up in front of the lot she'd marked. From the curb, it was obvious the house was significantly smaller than mine, maybe half the square footage at best. The yard was laughable. No backyard, just a patch of grass that dropped off behind a tall wooden fence, probably bumping up against someone else's property. Privacy? Forget it. No workshop, no pool, no space for my kids to run, let alone breathe. We got out and walked around the perimeter. Couldn't go inside, naturally, but Greg had a knack for measuring up square footage just by looking. "This thing's a shoebox," he muttered. "Kitchen, living room, maybe a powder room down here. 3 beds up top if you're lucky, and they'll be the size of closets. 1 full bath up there. Barely any storage." I pressed my face to the glass by the front door and confirmed as much. What little I could see inside was sterile and tight. The kind of house made for a single person or a couple with 1 small child, not a family of 5. My boys needed their own rooms, and my youngest would too in a few years. Hell, even our damn dog would have felt cramped in that place. Greg crossed his arms. "You'd be trading down, way down. This isn't an offer, it's a hustle." That's when the silver Audi rolled up. I recognized it immediately. Karen stepped out, heels clicking across the concrete, flanked by the same 2 goons I'd seen lurking behind her during our earlier encounter. She looked surprised to see me, maybe more annoyed than surprised. "You're not allowed to be here," she said, her smile already cracking. "This is private HOA property, members only." I raised an eyebrow and held up the brochure. "You gave me the address, said to check it out." Her tone didn't soften. "Well, since you haven't accepted the offer, you're technically trespassing. The terms are at the bottom in the fine print. It clearly states that the area is restricted to HOA members." I glanced down. Sure enough, in barely legible 6-point font, the disclaimer was right there. Classic bait and switch maneuver. Before I could say anything, she shifted her posture, her voice suddenly sugary again. "So, have you come to a decision?" she asked, stepping a little closer. "Yeah," I said flatly. "I'm not interested. I'm keeping my home." The fake sweetness drained from her expression. Her voice went cold. "Then you owe a $1,000 trespassing fine. You and your friend can leave now." Greg and I exchanged a look. I wasn't about to argue with her on her turf, especially not with those 2 muscleheads watching like bored bouncers. We got in the truck and drove off without another word. But as we turned the corner, I saw Karen in the rearview mirror, standing with her arms crossed, watching us leave with something fierce and unreadable in her eyes. Something told me this wasn't over, not even close. 2 mornings later, I found a heavy cream envelope shoved into my mailbox, sealed with the HOA's insignia, like it was some medieval royal decree. I knew what it was before I even opened it, but seeing it in black and white still pissed me off more than I expected. The letter inside was as smug as Karen's voice had been when she handed me that damn brochure. A formal notice of violation and a demand for payment. $1,000 for unauthorized presence on private HOA property. Attached were glossy, full-color photos. Me and Greg, clear as day, walking around the front of the house, peering through the windows. You'd think we were casing the place for a heist. According to the document, I had exactly 14 days to pay the fine, and if I didn't, a daily penalty of $250 would be added until it was resolved, plus potential legal action. It read like a ransom note dressed up in business casual. I paced the living room with the paper clutched in my fist. My wife sat quietly at the kitchen island watching me, the tension rising with each step I took. I dealt with HOA crap before, but this was something else. It wasn't just predatory, it was personal. "This is blackmail," I muttered. Thinly veiled blackmail in a nice envelope. "Call her," my wife said, voice low but firm. "Sort this out before it spirals." So I did. The number on the letter led me straight to the HOA office. Some poor receptionist answered, sounding entirely too chipper. I didn't have the patience for small talk. I demanded to speak to Karen, and after being placed on hold with the most obnoxious smooth jazz I'd ever heard, she picked up. "Mr. Reed," she said sweetly, "I trust you've received our notice?" "I'm not paying it." There was a pause. "I beg your pardon. You heard me. This is harassment. You invited me to view the house. You gave me the address. You practically begged me to come check it out, and now you're fining me for it." "Mr. Reed," she said, her tone dropping like a guillotine blade. "The terms were clearly printed in the material. You violated HOA grounds without being a member. There are consequences." I gripped the phone tighter. "If you think you can intimidate me with bogus paperwork and glossy photos, you've got the wrong guy." Karen was silent for a beat, then chuckled softly like she was genuinely amused. "You'll change your mind, Mr. Reed. Sooner or later, everyone does." I hung up before I could say something I'd regret, but that call made something clear. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about real estate or HOAs or even money. This was about her ego. I'd bruised it, and now she wanted payback. I just didn't realize how far she'd go to get it. It happened the very next day, right around noon. I was in the backyard cleaning out the pool filter when my oldest son poked his head out of the sliding door and called, "Dad, there's some lady at the front gate. Says she knows you." I already knew who it was. By the time I made it around the side of the house, Karen was standing in my driveway like she owned it. Her silver Audi was parked by the curb, and next to it stood the two same stone-faced gorillas I'd seen with her at the HOA property. One bald, one with a neck thicker than my thigh. Neither of them smiled, but Karen did. Oh, she smiled all right. Not the sugary, flirtatious kind she wore during her sales pitch. No, this one was colder, calculated. She was dressed differently too. Less glam, more business. High heels still, but a dark suit jacket over a crisp blouse. Hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. No games this time. "I thought we should talk in person," she said, voice smooth and venom-laced. "About your little outburst on the phone yesterday." I crossed my arms and didn't say a word. Karen took a slow step forward, her heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation. "You owe the HOA a fine, Mr. Reed, and instead of resolving it, you threatened us. That's not very neighborly." I let out a dry laugh. "You're not my neighbor. You're a parasite with a mailing list." Her smile twitched, just a bit. "Charming. But this is your last chance to make it right. Pay the fine, apologize, and we can let this all go." "And if I don't?" She stepped aside and gestured toward her muscle. "Then these gentlemen might have to remind you how to speak respectfully to a woman." My stomach clenched, not from fear. Adrenaline, maybe. Rage. I took one slow step forward until we were eye to eye. "You show up to my house where my wife and kids live, and you bring hired threats. You think that makes you powerful?" Before she could answer, the front door opened behind me. I turned just enough to see my kids step out onto the porch. My daughter, barely out of elementary school, clinging to her older brother's side. Karen noticed too. Her posture changed instantly. Her eyes flicked toward the street. An older couple walking their dog was passing by. I saw her calculation in real time. Too many witnesses. Too public. Her tone flipped like a switch. "Well," she said lightly, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve. "Perhaps this isn't the time. We'll talk again soon. In private." She turned and walked back to her car, heels clacking like a ticking clock. Her two shadows followed without a word. I stood there long after they drove off, fists clenched at my sides. This wasn't just petty anymore. This was war. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I kept checking the windows, replaying Karen's smug face in my head, those two gorillas flanking her like she was some damn mob boss. My wife tried to calm me down, but even she was shaken. When someone threatens you at your own front door, in front of your kids, something breaks inside you, and that something doesn't fix easy. By morning, I'd already made up my mind. I picked up the phone and called my brother, Caleb. He was the only person I knew who could untangle a mess like this and not just walk away clean, but leave the other guy bleeding. Figuratively, of course, usually. A top-tier attorney based in Chicago, Caleb had the kind of mind you wanted on your side when things got ugly. He was the one who helped me and our neighbors take down the last version of the HOA in court. Without him, we'd probably be living under their bylaws right now, if we were lucky enough to still be living here at all. I told him everything. The fine, the photos. Karen showing up at my door with two hired goons like she was casting for a B-grade crime thriller. Caleb didn't even hesitate. "I'll be on the next flight." By nightfall, he was in my driveway, stepping out of a rented black sedan with his laptop bag slung over one shoulder and a look that said he meant business. He hugged my wife, ruffled my son's hair, gave me that nod he always gave before we went to battle, and then got to work. We sat up for hours going over the documents, the letter, the HOA's bylaws, everything. He took photos, scanned files, made notes like a machine. Then he leaned back, rubbed his jaw, and said, "This woman's dangerous, smart too. This is an amateur hour." I didn't need convincing. The next morning, Caleb packed his bag again and said he needed a few days. Wouldn't tell me where he was going, only that he needed to dig deeper. "Stay alert," he said, climbing into the car. "Don't provoke her, but don't back down either. I'll be back when I have what we need." And just like that, he was gone again. No contact, no texts, no emails. And for 5 long days, I had no idea what the hell he was doing. When Caleb finally returned, it wasn't with a text or a knock at the door. It was the sound of his rental car screeching into my driveway like he'd just outrun something. He got out wild-eyed and thrust a flash drive into my hand before I could say a word. "Call the police," he said, breathless. "Not the local ones. Use this number." He handed me a folded slip of paper with an out-of-town precinct written in sharp black ink. Then he leaned back against the car like he'd run a marathon. "What the hell happened?" I asked, staring at him. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'll explain later," he said, eyes darting toward the road like he expected someone to follow. "But that drive has everything. Enough to bury her." It wasn't until hours later, after the chaos that followed, that Caleb finally told me what had happened. And I'll tell you now exactly the way he told me that night, sitting in my living room with a bandage over his temple and a cold beer in his hand. He started with the cafe. After he left, he headed into town and set up camp in a quiet coffee shop with decent Wi-Fi. His plan was to do what he did best: research, dig, connect dots. He started by pulling HOA filings, tracing property records, tracking down previous complaints against Karen and the organization. But then, fate, or karma, threw him a curveball. She walked in. Karen, dressed in some designer activewear that looked like it had never seen a gym. She didn't recognize him. Why would she? He was just a stranger in a new place. That's when the plan shifted. Caleb spilled his coffee, made sure she noticed, played the awkward charming card he kept tucked in his back pocket for moments just like that. And Karen, she bit hard. She thought he was just some wealthy out-of-towner scouting the area for investment. He told her he had money, connections, and interest in revitalizing neighborhoods. She invited him to dinner the same night. Over the next few days, she wined and dined him like he was royalty, let him into her home, trusted him. Hell, she seduced him. And once she was asleep, Caleb did what he really came to do. He hacked her laptop, her phone, her cloud backups. Night after night, while she snored beside him, he was inside her files. What he found made his stomach turn. Financial fraud, embezzlement, extortion, fake invoices, forged signatures, even private correspondence with a local judge and 2 corrupt officers. She'd been running a racket, using the HOA to launder money and control property through legal threats and fabricated violations. And I wasn't the first target. Caleb had it all. Every dirty document, every incriminating text, every bank transfer. But on the 5th night, she caught on. He didn't know how. Maybe a misplaced file. Maybe just a gut feeling on her part. But she came at him screaming, swinging a lamp. He bolted, barely made it out with the drive and his life. And now she knew. Now she was coming. I barely had time to process what Caleb had told me before I saw the headlights, bright beams cutting through the early evening haze, followed by the unmistakable purr of that silver Audi pulling up just beyond the gate. She was here, Karen, and she wasn't alone. Her 2 hired brutes climbed out right behind her, dressed this time not in business casual muscle wear, but in black jackets and gloves, like they were headed into something they didn't plan to walk away from clean. Karen stormed up the walkway, fury carved into every line of her face. Whatever mask she used for the neighborhood, smiles, charm, honey-coated sales pitches, it was gone. She started shouting before she even reached the porch. "Where is he? Where's that lying, snake-faced bastard?" My brother stepped beside me at the top of the stairs, his jaw tight. "Guess she figured it out." Karen looked up at us like a woman possessed, her eyes locking onto Caleb with pure hatred. "You think you're clever? You think sleeping with me gives you the right to dig through my life?" She jabbed a finger in the air, trembling with rage. "You broke into my privacy, my property. You broke the law," Caleb snapped. "A lot of them." Her voice cracked into something unhinged. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." Behind her, the 2 goons flanked the steps, one circling toward the side of the house. The other started tapping a heavy ring against the front door's glass pane, slow and rhythmic. I stepped back and turned to Caleb. "You said to call the cops. You'd better hope that number you gave me wasn't a bluff." "They're on their way," he said, "but we've got maybe a minute." Down below, Karen kept yelling, but I wasn't hearing the words anymore. My eyes were on the muscle tearing open my side gate. My hand tightened around the old hunting shotgun I hadn't held in years. This was it. She knew the truth now. She knew what Caleb had done, and she had come to silence it, with fear, or worse. I gripped the shotgun tighter and stepped out onto the second-floor balcony. Caleb stood beside me, eyes narrowed, calm like always, even now. Below us, Karen was still pacing the lawn, her heels sinking into the grass, her voice rising into incoherent shrieks. "You've ruined everything!" she screamed, pointing up at Caleb. "Do you even know who I have on my side? Do you know what I can do?" I didn't answer. I chambered a shell and raised the barrel skyward. The crack of the blast split the air like lightning. It echoed across the neighborhood, startling birds from trees and sending a clear message. This wasn't a bluff. For a split second, everything stopped. Karen froze, mouth open mid-threat. Her goons turned sharply toward the sound. One of them, the taller one with the shaved head, immediately ducked behind the Audi. The other, less cautious, kept going, storming toward the front door, now smashing the side window with his elbow. I turned to Caleb. "Any more bright ideas?" "Yeah," he said. "Don't let them in." Too late. The sound of wood splintering came from downstairs. They were inside. My heart pounded as I dashed back into the hallway and locked the bathroom door behind me. Caleb ran the other way toward the stairs, grabbing the old iron fireplace poker as his weapon of choice. One of the thugs kicked open the bathroom door almost immediately, but I was already gone, slipping through the adjacent hallway that connected to the dining room. I heard glass shattering, furniture being knocked over. My house, my sanctuary, was under siege. Caleb was the first to make contact. I heard the grunt, the crash, and then the sickening thud of metal against skull. When I rounded the corner, I saw one of the goons on the floor, twitching, Caleb standing over him with the bent poker in both hands. But the second one wasn't far behind. He burst through the hallway, tackled Caleb against the wall, and wrapped his arms around his throat in a chokehold. Caleb thrashed, face reddening fast, his feet scrabbling for traction. I lifted the shotgun, aimed at the wall near them, not to kill, but to scare, and fired. The blast ripped into the drywall just inches away, deafening, violent. The second goon flinched, loosened his grip just long enough for Caleb to elbow him in the gut. I followed through with the butt of the shotgun, cracking it hard across the back of his skull. He dropped like a stone. For a moment, everything was quiet. except for Karen, still screaming outside like she didn't know or didn't care that her enforcers had just been taken down. Then came the sirens. The sirens howled louder with each passing second, cutting through the aftermath like a blade. Red and blue lights painted the street outside, dancing across the broken windows and cracked drywall, but inside, it still felt like a war zone. I was crouched near the second thug's unconscious body, my chest heaving, shotgun trembling slightly in my grip. Caleb leaned against the wall, one hand pressed to his neck, catching his breath. His shirt was torn, face flushed, but he was still standing. From outside, Karen's voice rose again, shrill and erratic. "They assaulted my staff. They broke into my house. They're armed. You have to arrest them." I stood up slowly, adrenaline still pumping, and looked at Caleb. "She's still spinning it." "Of course she is," he muttered, wiping blood from his lip. But it's too late. I rushed to the front door just as it burst open, not from a thug this time, but from a pair of uniformed officers in tactical gear, weapons drawn. I immediately dropped the shotgun and raised both hands high. Caleb followed suit behind me. "Down! On the ground, both of you, now!" One of them barked. "No sudden moves," another warned. I went down slowly, face to the floor, heart thudding in my ears. I could hear Karen outside still performing her drama for the arriving patrol cars, crying about how we'd lured her here, how we were violent, unhinged. She was putting on a show, and I had no doubt it had worked before. But this wasn't the same police department she controlled. Caleb had made sure of that. Another set of boots came up the steps, plain clothes this time. A tall man with a badge clipped to his belt stepped inside, scanned the room, then pointed toward Caleb. "You're Caleb Reed?" Caleb, still on the floor, nodded. "That's me." Flash drives in my jacket. Two officers helped him up and checked the pocket. The agent pulled out the flash drive carefully, glanced at the chaos around us, shattered windows, broken furniture, two unconscious men, and then radioed something into his shoulder mic. "Secure the scene. Arrest the woman outside. We're charging her with conspiracy, assault, and fraud, possibly racketeering." I couldn't see Karen, but I heard her voice break into shrill protest as she was cuffed. "You can't do this. I'm the victim. I run this neighborhood. I have lawyers." But no one was listening anymore. Not this time. The courtroom was packed. Press, neighbors, even a few former HOA members sat on the wooden benches, eyes locked on the front where Karen sat like a statue behind the defense table. Gone was the polished blazer, the perfect hair, the smug smile. She wore beige now, standard-issue jailhouse beige, with her wrists shackled and her expression blank, except for the faint twitch in her jaw every time Caleb spoke. He stood confidently before the judge, laying out the case with the same calm precision I'd seen him use to win over juries for years. Only this time, the stakes weren't just legal. This was personal. He showed the flash drive evidence in full. Financial records, money laundering through HOA fees, threats sent to residents who refused to join, and the manipulated zoning applications Karen used to push out old homeowners for new development. But it was the recordings that sealed it. Audio files taken from her own phone of her discussing payoffs with a city inspector, bragging about how no one challenges me and walks away clean, and, worst of all, a voice note sent to one of her goons telling him to scare that stubborn idiot into paying or make him disappear for a while. My name was in the file. The room was dead silent when the playback ended. Even the judge looked shaken. Karen's lawyer, a stiff, red-faced man who clearly hadn't realized what kind of case he'd inherited, tried to argue entrapment, violation of privacy, manipulation. Caleb shredded every word of it. By noon, the defense had nothing left but muttering and crossed arms. The jury took less than 3 hours. Karen, guilty on all major counts: fraud, conspiracy, assault, intimidation, and attempted extortion. 20 years minimum, no parole for the first 10. Her 2 bodyguards, 15 years each. Prior records sealed their fate quickly, but it didn't stop there. The arrest triggered an investigation into the entire HOA structure. Several board members were indicted. The corrupt judge and 2 local cops Karen had in her pocket were also exposed and charged. Within 2 months, the HOA was completely dismantled, dissolved by court order. Their properties sold off to pay restitution, the entire operation reduced to ashes, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. A month after the trial, the yard was finally quiet again. Not the tense kind of quiet, not the holding your breath kind, but the peaceful, full-bellied kind. The kind that comes with the smell of grilling meat, kids laughing by the pool, and music floating through the evening air like it had nothing better to do. We threw a party, a big one, the kind that said, "We're still here, and this is ours, and you don't get to scare us away." Neighbors came with their families, bringing folding chairs and covered dishes, cases of beer, and stories to swap. My wife had the grill running from 4 in the afternoon, and the kids turned the backyard into their personal water park, cannonballing into the pool like they'd been holding it in for weeks. Caleb was there too. He'd extended his visit indefinitely. Said Chicago could wait. He lounged in a patio chair with a drink in one hand and a ridiculous straw hat someone had tossed on his head, grinning like a man who'd just won a prize fight. "You know," he said, sipping, "not every case ends with justice and barbecue." I laughed, handing him a plate stacked with ribs. "You're just mad you had to sleep with the villain to win." He smirked. "Don't knock my methods." Worked, didn't it? The sun dipped low, turning the sky orange behind the trees, and the fire pit started crackling in the corner of the yard. My wife came over, wrapped her arm around my waist, and kissed my cheek. "We made it," she whispered. I looked out at the lights strung across the fence, at the people we'd fought for and with, and at the house that still stood tall behind us. 3 stories, strong, unshaken. "Yeah," I said. "We really did." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was defending something. I felt like I'd already won.